everybody, welcome to this week's park video. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy and enjoying your summer so far. I miss you all so much and I hope that we can see each other soon, but until then I will continue making these videos for you. So last week we talked about the creation story, and that was kind of the first story in the Bible, and it was the first story of our series called The Story. We learned about all the things that God made and God created, including Adam and Eve, the humans, and how Adam and Eve brought sin into our world. So this week we are talking all about rules and how God created these rules to help guide his people like us. These rules help to guide us. I want you to think about some of the rules that you might have at home or at school, and with whoever you're watching this video with, I want you to talk about some of those rules and why you have those rules. Why do we have rules at home, and why do we have rules at school? I want you to talk about that with whoever you're watching this video with. So I'm going to be sharing a story with you today about 10 rules that God gave his people. But first, I want to give you some background information, so let's get into that. So in the Old Testament of the Bible, there were two groups of people, the Israelites and the Egyptians. And because the Israelite family was getting bigger, the Egyptians became jealous of them and they turned them into their slaves. So the Israelites were slaves to the Egyptians. But God sent a man named Moses to save the Israelites so that they wouldn't be slaves anymore. And after a lot of bad things happened, Moses did finally convince the Egyptians to free the Israelites so that they wouldn't be slaves anymore. And God led the Israelites out of Egypt and into the desert. And that is kind of where our story begins. Alright, so now that you have a little bit more information, I'm going to read you the story called 10 Ways to Be Perfect. And before I get started, I just want to talk about this title. It says 10 Ways to Be Perfect, but is anybody really perfect? I don't think so. I think God is the only one that is perfect. So just keep that in mind as we read this story. Here we go. So there they all were. Grannies, granddads, babies, uncles, aunts, children, moms and dads. Out there in the middle of the desert. They had blisters from all the walking. They were hungry and thirsty and much, much too hot. We don't like it, they said. It stinks. And so did they, for that matter, because no one had taken a bath in weeks. Now remember, because this is something they'd forgotten, God had done amazing things for his people. He'd hidden them inside a cloud. He'd moved the sea. He'd set them free. But God's people still weren't happy. They didn't care about being free. Wasn't it better when they were slaves? At least they'd had lots of nice food to eat. God doesn't want us to be happy, they said. It was the same lie that Adam and Eve had heard all those years before. God had brought us out here to kill us. God doesn't love us. But they didn't know God very well, did they? Every day of their journey, God kept on showing his people how well he would look after them if they would just trust him and obey him. When they were hungry, God made the sky rain with food, bread coming down from heaven. What is it? They asked each other. They didn't know, so they called it. What is it? Which of course is a very good name for something when you don't know what it is. When they were thirsty and started quarreling, God made water flow from a rock. Moses called that place Quarreling, because that seemed like a good name too. And still, God's children didn't trust him or do what he said. They thought they could do a better job of looking after themselves and making themselves happy. But God knew there was no such thing as happiness without him. So God led them to a tall mountain. God wanted to talk to his people and show them what he was like. He wanted to help them know him better and tell them about the special land he was going to give them. The whole earth belongs to me, God said, but I have chosen you. You are my special family. I want you to live in a way that shows everyone else what I'm like, so they can know me too. I'm going to show you this picture. God called Moses up the mountain. The great mountain shook. A thick cloud fell, and thunder roared. Lightning crackled, and God gave Moses 10 rules called commandments. I want you to love me more than anything else in all the world, and know that I love you too, God told them. That's the most important thing of all. God gave them other rules, like don't make yourselves pretend gods, don't kill people, or steal, or lie. The rules showed God's people how to live and how to be close to Him and how to be happy. They showed how life worked best. God promises to always look after you, Moses said. Will you love Him and keep these rules? We can do it. Yes, we promise. But they were wrong. They couldn't do it. No matter how hard they tried, they could never keep God's rules all the time. God knew they couldn't, and He wanted them to know it too. Only one person could keep all the rules. And many years later, God would send him to stand in their place and be perfect for them. Because the rules couldn't save them. Only God could save them. So in this story, they talk at the very end about one person who could follow all these rules, or keep all these rules, as the story says. And one person who ends up being perfect, and God sends him. And I want you to think about who that one person could be. And we learn about this person quite often in Sunday school, and his name starts with a J. So who do you think that person is that is perfect? Because we aren't perfect. God is perfect, and there's one person that God sends who is also perfect. So I want you to think about who that could be. That is our story for the week, and I want to ask you why you think we have these rules. Why do you think God made these rules for us? Well, God made these rules for us to help guide us so that people could see what we're doing and want to know more about God. And sometimes we mess up, and that's okay. Like in the story, God's people couldn't always keep the rules, but we have this man called Jesus who forgives us for all of our sins and who stepped in to be that perfect person to follow all these rules. So even though sometimes we can't follow these rules, that's okay. And we can ask for forgiveness, and we can pray for forgiveness from God. So the rules are kind of like a guide, and that was our big idea, is that God gave His people these rules as a guide, or kind of like a map to help us live our lives. And like I said, it's okay if we mess up sometimes, but it's just a guide to help us be better people. I hope you have a great week. I will talk to you next week, and I will be sending the lesson plan via email and Facebook to parents that you can do alongside this video. And like I said, I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.